and welcome to Healthy Kingston, a health promotion and wellness program of the Kingston Board of Health. I'm Janet Wade, your host. Today we're speaking about a very interesting topic, particularly for parents, and it's very prevalent these days, and that is behavioral needs and concerns in children. And feel very fortunate to have a guest here who was very well informed and has some wonderful information for us. Samantha Dean.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. She's an occupational therapist. She founded and is the director of a program by the name of Little Snackers Therapeutic Program. And she'll tell you a little bit more about it, but they have up to 70 children enrolled there right now, all age groups, and with extensive behavioral concerns. So I was telling her how much I admire people like her who help us with our children, help them to be happier, healthier, more fulfilled adults. So thank you.
Oh, thank you, Janet.
Okay, Samantha, or Sam, so what exactly is a pediatric occupational therapist, and what do you do?
So occupational therapy can work with anyone of any age, but pediatric occupational therapy is obviously specific to children. And when we think about the term occupation, we think usually of job. And instead of thinking about your day-to-day job that you do to make money, it's more about the jobs you need to do every day to live. So for an adult, that's looking at, can I, cook? Can I provide myself food, hygiene, driving a car, going to work, keeping up with friends and family and things like that. But for children, that's looking at, are we able to access school? Can we play on the playground? Can we keep up with friends? Are we able to feed ourselves? Are we able to go to sleep at night safely and, self-regulate to be able to do all those things? So we are looking at essentially the functional skills specific to children that they need every day to, get, through their day-to-day life.
Sure. And I was surprised at the age range, how young. If you could tell us the age range you work with.
So right now the practice that I have opened works with as young as 6 years old and all the way up to preteen, teen years, but typical pediatrics and healthcare goes all the way up to 18 to 22. And we are working on really any developmental skill that is impeded. And so when you're looking at a 6-month-old, our clinic specifically focuses on occupational therapy as a whole, but has a very specialized niche in feeding therapy. So for a 6-month-old, it might be, are we transitioning to solids? But it also could be, are we moving through our motor skills to be able to access our environment and play? Are we socially engaging with our parents? Are we meeting those smaller milestones and fundamentals to build upon to bigger milestones? And then it goes all the way through your developmental years where, preteens and teenagers, are we, self-regulated to be able to engage with friends? Are we safely paying attention in school to be able to learn and grow? Are we eating the right foods to nourish our body and to support all of the developmental areas of our body as well?
What should parents be looking for? Particularly new parents. It just astounded me that you're working with children as young as 6 months old.
And so when we talk about developmental milestones, especially birth to 3 years old, it's such a range. So like typical walking is anywhere from 10 months to 18 months. And so that, pretty vast range when you break it down of like, when should we be concerned if a child isn't walking, or when the child's not developing language yet, or if they are a pickier eater or not transitioning to solids quite yet. And my biggest thing is at the first sign of any is that happening correctly, or I'm feeling like the milestones are not coming along as quickly, or we're not progressing. We're not moving, because every developmental milestone has a progressive. It's not just like I'm sitting one day and walking one day. There's movement involved and steps you take in between. And any sign of this seems a little funny, I always say, talk to your pediatrician. But especially in those younger years, the state of Massachusetts and most states have a program called early intervention, where it's a free home program for children, newborns to 3 years old, for providers who specialize in development to come into your home, do a full assessment of all areas of development, and let you know, is this something we should be concerned about and enroll your child in services, or nope, they're developing just fine, and call us back if there's any concerns that arise. And so I always say, the earlier the better, especially like we specialize in feeding therapy, and the toddler preschool years are, as early as 6 months, but like those toddler preschool years, if you have a picky eater, are a great time to address that, because then we get children who are in elementary school up to 9, 10 years old, and they've built those habits, and now it's a lot harder to work backwards and to meet those milestones almost in a reverse pattern. And so just any sign of having a hunch, it's better to just get it checked out.
Okay. How do you get your referrals? Or can I just call and say, I have a child who's slow walking?
Yeah, so we have on our website, we have a form. It's called a service inquiry form. You fill that out, and we automatically call you in 48 to 72 hours to get some further information. We also accept doctor referrals via fax. For pediatrics, most insurances don't require a referral from the doctor, given that it's pediatrics. So we are able to take most kids right off the bat without any call from the doctor. But you can give us a call. You can go on our website is the most efficient way to get on our wait list. But also giving us a call or having a doctor send a prescription. And then, at this time, because we are a private practice and we are a smaller practice, we do have a pretty extensive wait list. So I always say, in those instances, at the first sign of being concerned, call and be put on a wait list, because the world of pediatrics, we're seeing, as you know, like a lot more prevalence in behavioral concerns and self-regulation concerns and not being able to access those functional skills as easily. And so we're seeing way longer wait lists across the board in a lot of pediatric settings. And so I always say, call right ahead, get on a wait list, because even if in a few months when you're off the wait list you don't have concerns anymore, you don't have to follow through with services. But once you're on our wait list, we get you in for an eval as soon as we can and start services.
Wonderful. Speaking about the bigger picture, are there additional services like yours out in the community?
Absolutely. So I had mentioned early intervention, which is specific to birth to 3 years old. And then there are other private practices and clinics local to the South Shore, the Cape. And then there are some bigger corporate hospitals that have pediatric practices within them that you can access: occupational therapy, speech therapy, physical therapy. There's some more general mental health and behavioral programs in the areas. But there's not a ton on the South Shore. But there's definitely growing with the need, for sure.
Okay. Can you just give us just a few points that parents should be thinking about as their child is aging that might be a little off the norm that they might want to have evaluated?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and specific to some of the behavioral topics we were discussing prior to this filming, a lot of what we're seeing nowadays is, as occupational therapists, we work a lot with what's called self-regulation. And that's everyone's ability to maintain some level of regulation throughout your day to be able to function. And so some people get, we see them get more emotional, and that can lead to more dysregulation, where you're not thinking as clearly and you're not making choices as clearly, even as adults. And so that also happens as a child too. And we see kids who have these ranges of emotional regulation and dysregulation, and it causes them to have decreased attention, to have some of these behavioral concerns we're identifying, to have a difficult time making friends. And so what we've been seeing a lot lately is some of these things that are not as black and white, like, oh, my kid, isn't walking or doesn't have words or isn't eating, those are a little bit more obvious to parents,
right.
Where sometimes kids who might be, talking back a little bit more, or getting frustrated super easily, or having a really hard time sitting and following along to a library story hour among their peers, or having a hard time just following any direction. Sometimes we see that kind of brushed under the rug of just like, oh, they're just because they're this age, it's just because they're this age. And kind of keeping an eye on that from a self-regulation point of view and behavior point of view is important, because there are, especially with the increase in technology nowadays and just kind of the way the world is developing, we are seeing kids who need a little bit more support with some of those self-regulation, emotional regulation, and behavioral needs. I always tell a parent, kids have a right to feel how they want to feel, but sometimes the size of their feelings are so much bigger than they need to be.
Right.
A kid can get frustrated because you didn't let them have candy, but are we going to stomp around and throw things at windows and, run away from our parents and scream for 45 minutes? That's a really, really big response to something that, is a typical response, but that's a bigger response to a situation. So just keeping an eye on sometimes those situations where you're like, ooh, that was a little bigger than I might think.
Okay. So this has got me thinking, when would someone go to you versus a therapist?
It's a great question. So what we're often seeing now, and there's a big overlap with pediatrician referrals to us versus like a mental health provider, or like a therapist, talk therapist, psychologist. And it can be tricky sometimes when we get an intake call. And I've seen this over the course of my years of practicing, where sometimes I'm like, I don't know if we're the correct fit for you. With occupational therapy, we work on, like I mentioned before, self-regulation. And so some of the curriculums we work on are the zones of regulation. So that's understanding your feelings and then understanding coping styles attached to your feelings. We work on how does your engine run? Is your body moving too fast, too slow, or just right? The size of the problem, is this a tiny problem, a small problem, or is it an emergency? And so we give children this education and this awareness of how they're feeling and how to cope with it, and strategies to support them feeling more regulated so they don't have really big emotional responses to things, and they can go throughout their day feeling safe and confident in how they're thinking about things. And they might not have such these big behavioral responses. But when kids have specific underlying reasons for that, whether it's a diagnosis of anxiety or we have some children, who call us who their parents are going maybe through a divorce, or they're dealing with a lot in their personal life, or they're having difficulty with social situations or things like that. If there's an underlying diagnosis or an underlying reason that's causing all of this, we usually say we want you to see a mental health provider first, or a therapist first, to address the root of the cause. Right. And then we will support and work alongside that therapist to help them work on coping strategies and identifying their emotions and working through that in a more functional way where then it applies to their environment. We provide both in-clinic and in-home services, so it can be really helpful when we go into kids' homes and we're able to see their daily routine and where that's breaking down to not being as functional for them, or they need a little more support. Right. And we can address that directly, where a talk therapist is helping them kind of like understand what's going on in their brain and why they might be thinking that way, and then we kind of help them apply it to a more functional lifestyle. Okay, well that makes perfect sense. That's wonderful that you can work in conjunction with each other. Yes, absolutely. And sometimes we usually say, referring to that therapist first, getting a little time with them under your belt, and then coming to us for sure. Yeah, sure. Okay, there's a lot of discussion these days about ADHD, ADD, children being on the spectrum, autism, Asperger's. Can you speak to that a bit? Is it more common than it was, or it's diagnosed now? That's a great question. Me and my colleagues talk about that constantly. Is there more awareness of it, and so that we're seeing it being diagnosed more, or are there misdiagnoses, things like that? What is really unique, and I think there's two different things going on. I think there's far more awareness to it. I think that autism is a spectrum, and so children can fall somewhere on that spectrum and still fit into the description of autism. But unfortunately, we have seen children misdiagnosed and even had diagnoses removed later in life as they just have a little time getting the services they need. Well, that's why we don't always recommend getting diagnosed super, super young, because we want to give those kids a chance to get potentially some occupational therapy or speech therapy or some additional support to push things along, and then see, okay, if they get that support, are they then kind of up and running to not needing as much support in those areas. But that being said, there also are children who we see those diagnoses come through, and it's very consistent, and then we want to shift our treatment to support their learning styles and how they're viewing the world and seeing the world. And so I think there's a mixed bag of things going on. Years ago, the DSM, the diagnostic criteria, removed Asperger's, and I think that also caused a lot of like gray area on like, okay, well, we used to give kids an Asperger's diagnosis, and now we're not doing that anymore. And so do they just all fall into the autism bucket now? Or is there something else that we should be, supporting them with or categorizing them in as well? It's interesting because a lot of the kids who are getting diagnosed, I always tell parents, your child's just who they were the day before they got diagnosed. They have the same characteristics. They have the same mannerisms. They're the same exact person they were 24 hours before you got that diagnosis. We just now have a little more information on how they are learning and seeing the world that we can better support their needs. And so I don't know if, I think that does come from increased awareness, but I also do see a level of misdiagnosis happening on a smaller scale as well.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yes.
Do you bring the parents in
Yes.
to the therapy when you're talking with the children, working with the children?
Yep, it's usually a little bit of a split. Sometimes I will say, we see children with a lot of needs and varying needs. Some children, not as many as others. And sometimes when they come to our clinic, it's like, okay, my child's in a safe space for 45 to 60 minutes and I can go read a book in my car for a minute, or I can go drink a coffee for a minute, or I can just take a walk around the block. They have to stay on the property, but it gives them a moment of I know my child's with someone safe, and so I'm going to take a minute to myself. So we always give parents that option, with the caveat that they always have to come in 5 to 10 minutes before the end of the session to go over any home exercise programming or parent education or see how their child's doing.
Right.
But we very much encourage parents to be a part of the session if they can. We feel it's super helpful in carrying over what we're teaching. And then they can also see how certain ways we interact with the child and strategies we're using, they can mimic at home. And it helps them understand, if I phrase it this way, or if I set an environment up this way, or if I use a visual schedule, or if I use first then language, they're a little bit more willing to follow through and complete whatever task we're working on.
Yeah. No, that's excellent. Now, I personally, this person's an adult now, but I had a family member who has ADD, and we were all in on it. I mean, the poor kid had 5 parents.
Yep.
Because we all were well versed in, how to say things, how to set things up for him, this type of thing. Reminders.
And it's nice to know that I have multiple friends with ADD and ADHD and family members as well. And, I think there's times that has such a stigma attached to it. And we, as children, I'm sure parents are very nervous about that and they don't know what the future holds. But if you give them the right tools and understand that the tools and the strategies are going to be helpful for them, it doesn't impede their ability to do whatever they want to do in life. To an extent, there's definitely can make things harder. But I'm sure those strategies and that support, if they have the right support and the right strategies, they can put their mind to, things just like everybody else. And I think there's a big stigma around it that it stops children from being able to progress in a certain way.
Right. No, I'm glad you said that, and if you could emphasize that even more, because yes, as a parent, when you get these diagnoses, you're like, oh my Lord, what kind of what's this person going to do for a vocation later in life? Are they going to amount to anything? I mean, I'm scared. What can I do? But obviously, there are things people like you can do to enhance their quality of life.
Absolutely, and learning about your child at an earlier age. I don't love the wait and see approach. I think that with everything, anything from a kid who has too many ear infections who might need tubes, to a kid who has strep too many times and needs tonsils out, to a kid who might be more distracted in class and needs a little more support learning. I don't love a wait and see approach. If you have access to the healthcare system in a way that allows you to go see a provider and get things checked out, I usually recommend that in that sense, where if we can identify a child's learning style and a child's way of thinking early on, then we can set their life up to be more productive for them and meet them where they're at. I had a friend text me the other day that she was worried about her son who's in preschool because he was getting some testing done and they were saying how he's more of a mover and a shaker in class. And my response to her was, in a sense where he like wasn't learning his letters and things like that, or he didn't want to sit in color and all that stuff. And my response to that was, well, it just sounds like he's a different learner. It sounds like he's a kinesthetic learner, which means he just needs, instead of sitting there with a crayon or a paper and pencil and copying letters over and over again, like let him draw them in shaving cream, let him bounce on a ball while he's doing his work, give him movement breaks, and he's going to be a kid who does a great job working with his hands and learning on his feet, and the world needs a lot of that just as much as it needs anyone who can sit and attend for longer periods of time. And so understanding that the world needs every type of person for every type of job is a great way to, I think, look at that. It's more just when you get these diagnoses, it can be startling and it can be a lot of unknown, but it can also be like, okay, now I know more about my child and how we can better support them. And it might take a little bit more strategy, and we might need a little bit more of visual schedules and reminders and cues and leaving things out so they know certain things to do. But they can still learn and grow. It's just a little, it's different for everybody.
Different, yeah. And I'm finding, fortunately, I'm thinking you're probably seeing this too, teachers seem to me a lot more well-versed in these type of behaviors and how to deal with them and the different teaching styles, learning styles.
Absolutely.
And they certainly were back in the day.
Yes, I would agree with that schools and teachers are becoming more aware that just sitting in a chair and attending to a lesson for extended time is not supporting the child's brain to stay stimulated.
Right.
And so we're seeing a lot more alternative seating or a lot of what we call sensory walks in the hallway, where it's like lily pads to jump on and wall push-ups and movement breaks to incorporate in their day. And we're seeing a lot more kids having access to occupational therapy in the school, or just groups that give them that break to support their longer attention spans in the classroom, for sure.
That's wonderful. And I guess, speaking as a parent, advocating for your child with the teacher.
Yes.
Because this family member did have issues with a couple of teachers and didn't know much about his background. And, I emphasized this person needs a front row seat, needs to be engaged, needs lists, that type of thing. So it helps if you advocate for your child, too.
Absolutely, yeah. And the school system can be tricky. A lot of parents will say to me, I don't know what I'm supposed to know when it comes to the school system. So I don't know what I'm supposed to ask for, and I don't know where I can support my child better. And specific advocates for these situations are expensive. And so even just talking to local providers like myself and other people who work with kids can be helpful even in that way, to give them a little understanding of what we look at on IEPs and how to support families when they are accessing the school system.
Okay. So if you had 3 takeaways, what would they be?
Specific to 3 takeaways for parents.
You think you have a child that has
My takeaways would be go to early intervention if you're noticing anything before 3, because it's a wonderful program. It's free. They come to your house, and you get access to a lot of things. I used to work in early intervention, so I know a lot about it. And we always used to say it's the club you don't want to get into, but once you're into it, you don't want to leave. So we have a lot of families who have really enjoyed being in early intervention, and you learn a lot. I would say your child is exactly who your child's supposed to be, and just to understand them and their way they grow and learn and see life, no matter if they have a diagnosis or not. And that if your child is over 3, and if you have any concerns, call and put your child on a wait list, because on the South Shore, wait lists are expensive for any type of therapy, and they're few and far between to come by. Wonderful.
Sam Dean, we are fortunate to have you in this community. Thank you so much for all you do with children here. And I've certainly learned a lot, and I'm sure you have as well.
Thank you very much for having me, Janet.